You're so noisy.
Me?
Mhm.
I'm trying to untangle the cords.
Right. Hello. Welcome to White Davy Gardening in Worm Farm. Today we are going to be discussing bottom watering. And if you'll just excuse me for a minute. Sorry about that. So, how are you guys doing? Child, can you hurry up or leave that alone? Because you're making too much noise.
Okay. Okay. Finally.
All right, be quiet, please go. You should have done that already.
Yeah.
Kids can be a handful, can't they? Okay, so yes, we are going to be discussing bottom watering. We're going to be looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of bottom watering your indoor plants. We're going to be looking at uh, how to do it as well. So, you know that as the growing season outdoors end, there are some of us gardeners who will be growing plants indoors, and then there are those who are just simply overwintering a few plants, or they might have indoor plants that they have all year round. Hi Rodney, how are you? Okay, thanks. Yes, so whatever the situation is, we're going to be looking at bottom watering plants indoors because there are so many advantages to it and there are disadvantages, unfortunately. Now, one of the issue with indoor garden is that watering plants can be tricky. There is always the possibility of overwatering plants, and so many things can go wrong as well as it can go very well. So, because a lot of newcomers, especially, tend to have problems with watering the plants, so today's discussion is there to help such ones so that they can find the best way to water their plants without having these issues. Okay, you're doing well, Rodney. That's good. Yes, so for those who are new to gardening, this is for you, and even for those who are not necessarily new to gardening indoors, there are still some information that may prove beneficial to you. Okay, so what is bottom watering for those who are not familiar with the expression? It is done by placing a potted plant into another container with water. The potted plant must have a hole or a few drain holes in that container. And then you put it in a bowl of water and it will wick the water up from the bottom instead of watering the plant from the top. Hi, Cece. Yes, so we're going to start off by looking at the benefits of bottom watering plants. Now, what are the benefits? When bottom watering from the top, the soil tend to want to splash out, especially if you're using a large container to water. And depending on how far or how high above the plant you hold your watering can, then the soil tend to want to splash and create a big mess in your home, and you don't really want to have the mess to clean up. So bottom watering is advantageous where that is concerned. Now, when you water plants from the top, one of the disadvantage is that the water tends to drain out of the pot very quickly without saturating all of the soil or most of the soil. So the plants sometimes tend not to get enough water. So when you bottom water it, then this problem is averted. Bottom watering also helps to protect the foliage of your plants, because there are some plants that does not like to have a lot of moisture on the foliage. So when you bottom water, then these plants are protected. Another advantage is that when you bottom water, it helps your plants to develop strong roots as the roots go down to meet the water. Whereas a lot of time when we water from the surface or from the top, you'll find that the upper portion of the soil is wet and the lower portion of the soil is not. If that is the case, then the root would have to be growing upwards in order to meet the water, which does not strengthen your plants, because the deeper your roots go, the stronger your plants will be. So that is one disadvantage to watering from the top, because the water sometimes will just, the top will be wet and the bottom of the plant will not be getting sufficient water. Now, because the house is enclosed, so a lot of time what will happen is that the plants do not have good airflow. And when that happens, then if you water from the top, one of the things that's going to be happening is that your foliage is going to take longer than is usual to dry off. And when that happens, it increases the chances of your plants developing pests and for it to develop plant disease as well. So this is another advantage of what bottom watering your plants. And the sad thing about having your plants indoors and having them developing pests or disease is that once that happens, because the plants are in close proximity to each other, then the pathogens or the bacteria, whatever it develops, and the pest will transfer from one to another quite easily. So for this reason also, you don't want to top water your plants. Let's see. Hi, growing my own. I'm doing quite well, my dear. Okay, you're saying hi to Rodney and Cece. So how are you doing, growing my own? Yes, so you don't want to top water your plant for that reason. Now, some pests love moisture and they may like to live in either on the foliage of your plant, especially if it is moist, or they might choose to live in the top portion of your soil if the soil is very damp. And if that's happening, then they're going to be reproducing because they're found a home that they're comfortable with. Now, some pests will damage the foliage of your plants. There are some pests that will damage the root of your plant. So fungus gnats really do not damage your foliage of your plants. In fact, fungus gnats themselves don't really damage your plant, but their larvae are very good at damaging the root of your plants. So that is another reason why it is very good to bottom water your plants as opposed to top watering. Let's see. Okay, you're doing well growing my own. That's excellent. Another advantage is that when you bottom water, the soil stays damp longer, And you want the plant, you want it to stay damp longer, as long as you do not overwater, of course, because when you top water with all the airflow passing through the room, then that is going to help to dry out the soil faster than if you bottom water, because then the airflow is restricted. So that is another advantage to bottom watering. Another advantage, especially if you are watering seedlings, is that when you bottom water, then your seedlings do not get displaced. Sometimes when you're top watering your seedlings, either the water will cause the soil to erode from around your seedlings, or sometimes the force of the water might be so strong that it will break the seedlings, especially in the younger stage of the seedlings. So bottom watering is very advantageous in this respect. Now, here are some disadvantages to bottom watering. Bottom watering may prevent your plant from getting enough oxygen, because as the soil wicks the water from the bottom, all the soil particle is being saturated with water. The water is going to be displacing the oxygen that is in the soil, and for that reason, your plant will not be able to get as much oxygen as it would if you had watered from the top. Of course, one way to ensure that this is not too much of a problem is that you can bottom water your plant, but do not allow the soil to soak all the way up to the very top of the container, of the soil in the container, because then there will be some amount of soil with air in it because it has not been displaced by water. So that is one disadvantage of bottom watering. Now, one problem with bottom watering is sometimes you may end up overwatering your plants. And if that happens, then it can cause root rot, which you do not want. So it's a good idea to monitor your plants, or the amount of moisture in your plants, before you actually water your plants, because you don't want to be giving it too much water. Now, if you're using tap water, then there is a strong possibility that you're going to end up with salt buildup and mineral buildup in your soil. So, to avert this problem, it is recommended that you use rainwater or you use distilled water, and that will prevent this problem. Now, if you don't have distilled water and you don't have rainwater, the next option that you have to ensure that you are reducing the amount of mineral and salt buildup in your pots is to, once in a while, like once per month, you top water your plants, and that will help to flush out some of the salt and the mineral that is building up in your plants. So let's see. Growing My Own says, I never tried bottom watering before. Okay. Yes. Yes, I just started trying bottom watering in the last 2 years, more so this year than I did last year. So I'm kind of new to it, but it became necessary when I noticed that I was having issues with my seedlings constantly being damaged by watering them from the top. And then for this year, with all the issues with the fungus knots and stuff like that, so that is how I end up doing the bottom watering. And then I don't really want you guys to face that kind of problem when you are growing your plants indoors. So, thus this information today, because a lot of people are going to be overwintering plants indoors at this point in time, or they're going to be growing a garden, or they have indoor plants. So, yes. The next disadvantage is that when you have too much mineral and salt building up in your soil, then the plant won't be able to absorb neither the nutrients nor the water that is in the soil. So for that reason, bottom watering can be disadvantageous, but as I mentioned before, you can rectify that by using rain or distilled water, or by once per month you top water your plants. Now, unless you are using liquid fertilizer, bottom watering will not work when you fertilize your plant. It's not the best way to water your plant during that time when you had your fertilizer, because the fertilizer, solid fertilizer, depend on that water to get it down into the soil. So if you're adding fertilizer, then you may choose to top water, or the other option would be to put your fertilizer in the water that you are going to use to bottom water your plants, and then the plant will be able to wick the fertilizer from the water. Now, there are some questions that beginners to bottom watering may ask regarding bottom watering. And one such question is, how long should the plant remain in the water? And it is recommended that the plant stays in the water for roughly 15 minutes. Now, if it is a smaller plant, you might want to allow it to be in there less than 15 minutes. If it is a larger plant, like a large plant, then you might want to let it stay in the water for more than 15 minutes. But an average of 15 minutes is recommended. Of course, common sense, or let's not say common sense, but good judgment is required where this is concerned. Okay, and why it says 15. Okay. Yes, so good judgment is needed where this is concerned, because even though it is recommended that your plant stays in the water for 15 minutes or so, some depending on the type of soil that you have, your potting mix, some potting mix is going to wick water faster than others. And depending also not just on that, but on the size of the potted plant. So if you have a really, really small, like say, for example, a seedling tray, it can take just a few minutes and your seedling tray would be fully saturated. Or if you have like a large palm tree in your house, it could take more than 15 minutes too. So you have to use your judgment. So it is recommended that every now and then you check on the plant after you put it in the water to ensure that it is not getting oversaturated with the water. And if you have individual plants in individual containers that you're watering, then you that's easier to control. But then if you have a lot of plants, different sizes in one container that you're watering, then you want to keep on monitoring that and remove the smaller plants as soon as you see that the soil is saturated, and then let the larger one stays until the soil is saturated too. Let's see. And White is saying hello to Melanie. And White says not every garden can be bottom water. Every plant actually can be bottom watered, not necessarily every garden, but every plant can be when you're growing them indoors. But it's not recommended for very large potted plants that you have to be lifting, because that can be too heavy. So for those, then it's gonna be necessary for you to top water them. There are some plants that does not like to be bottom watered. So you have to know the type of plants that you're growing and whether or not they like to be bottom watered, because there are some plants that does not like to have a lot of moisture on them. So for those plants, they don't like a lot of moisture on the root. In that case, then if you're going to bottom water it, you have to make sure that you do not allow all of the soil to be fully saturated with moisture. But yes, some you want to take those plants out before the soil is fully saturated, because there are some roots that rot quite easily, while some roots will just enjoy having a good supply of moisture. Yes, I agree with you on White. Some outdoor gardens, sometimes it can be difficult to bottom water them. But for your indoor garden, pretty much all of them, apart from the very large ones that you'd have to lift. Of course, the large ones, or very large plants that you cannot lift, one way that you can ensure that you are bottom watering those ones is at the point in time where you're going to bring that plant indoors, you set up a basin that the plant is going to be resting in, and then you pour your water into that basin and put your potted plant in there. So permanently, that potted plant stays in that basin, and then you add your water to it. You just have to be careful that you do not add too much water to it, because it is sitting in that basin permanently. Hi, Princess. How are you? Princess says, hello, it's me. Just carry on. Uh, yeah, so that is how you can bottom water large plants. So, again, 15 minutes is what is recommended, but then you have to use your judgment to decide how long it's going to stay in there. Another question that those who are new to bottom watering may ask is, can you overwater? Which, as I mentioned before, yes, you can actually overwater your plants. So that is why you need to be checking on it regularly to ensure that it is not becoming oversaturated. And if it is the case where you end up overwatering the plant, then what you want to do is allow the soil to dry out as much as is possible before you water it again. It can be tricky knowing whether the soil is dried out fully or partially. You don't want to allow it to dry out fully, because then you could end up damaging your plant. But you want to allow it to dry out as much as is possible without causing harm. The next thing that you can do is ensure that you take that plant out of the tray or whatever container you're using to water it, and allow it to drain properly. If possible, having airflow in that room might help to dry it out a bit faster. So whether you're going to use a fan, but then you don't want to dry out those plants that you've just watered that you didn't over water. So you might want to put that plant one side and run the fan for a while, so that, or put it close to the heat, but not enough where it will get damaged by the heat, and that might help to dry it out quickly. Or you can just let it dry out naturally. Now, how do you bottom water your plants? The potted plant is placed in a container with water. You add a few inches of water to that container that it is placed in, and you allow it to sit for 15 minutes, give or take. Now, once you see where the top of the soil is starting to show trace of moisture, then you want to remove the potted plant from the container of water and discard the water. Then you're going to allow the plants to drain. Now, for me, when I am bottom watering, each pot has their individual catchment trays, and they sit in that permanently. So the water is added to that bowl that they are sitting in. So for me, I try to make sure that I had just enough water that the plant will need. I don't allow the top inch of my soil to get wet. And the reason I don't allow the top inch of my soil to get wet is because for those pests that actually love moisture, like those fungus gnat, even if you water from the bottom, as long as the top of the soil is moist, they're going to be going down into that potted plant, and then they're going to be having their larvae eating the roots of your plants. So for me personally, the top inch of my plants I don't allow, or the top inch of my potted plants, I don't allow the soil to get wet, because I've had issues where I bottom water and these fungus knots will still go down into the pot and lay their eggs, and then the trouble begins. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Okay. Growing My Own is saying hi to Han White and Princess Lillian. Yes, so you might not want to allow the very top of your soil to get damp for that reason. Now, if you are using containers, say for example, I know some people use their bathtub to water, to bottom water their plants, or they might use a large container. So if that is the case, then you want to take them out of the container as soon as the plant or the soil has weak enough water, and make sure that you allow them to drain properly. In the case where the plants are permanently in that bowl that you use to water them, then for that reason you're going to be monitoring your plants for a while. After you see that the soil is saturated, you want to monitor the plants for a while to make sure that any excess drainage that you see, you get rid of it, because remember, it is sitting in that container permanently. So you don't want to have any stagnant water there. You don't want to have any water there at all, because too much water is going to cause root rot. So get rid of whatever excess water there may be. Let's see. Princess Lillian says, growing my home. Lovely to see you. Okay. Now, do not allow your plants to sit for extended period of time in your water, because that can be damaging to your plants. Now, can fertilizer be added to your water when you are bottom watering? Definitely you can add fertilizer to your water. So for fertilizer that is water soluble, you just put it in your water, make sure it is dissolved into the water. If that is the case where you're going to be adding fertilizer to your bottom water, you want to ensure that you do not overwater. And the reason you don't want to overwater is that you're going to be wasting some of your fertilizer. So apart from the damage that the overwatering is going to cause, you're going to be wasting some of your fertilizer. So you try to use just enough water that you know your plants will actually need. You can also add liquid fertilizer to your water, or if you had fertilizer to the top of your potted plants, then you're going to need to top water those plants. The liquid fertilizer can be used to top water your plants as well, but because it is liquid, it is more advantageous to put it in the water that you're using to water the plants. Okay, so for some, I've heard that they have not been successful with bottom watering their plants. So, what is it that will cause your plant not cause bottom watering not to work? Well, if you have too much salt and mineral, like I mentioned before, in your potted plant, then naturally the plant will not be able to absorb the liquid that is in it. The next reason why your plant, you may notice that your plant doesn't seem to be, or the soil doesn't seem to be wicking the water, it would be an indication then that your soil is too compact. So you would need to modify your soil for bottom watering to work. Now, you don't want to have your soil compact whether you're top watering or bottom watering. But if it is compact, then the soil will not be able to absorb the water. So it is recommended that once you have potted plants on a regular basis, not too often, but as your plants grow, you may need to either up pot them or you may need to sometimes trim the root of your plant if you don't want to put the plant in a larger pot. So you may need to trim the roots, but not all plants like it when you trim the roots, so you have to be careful with that. You don't want to take off too much of the roots either. So hot potting would be the way to go. But like I said, if your soil is not wicking the water, then it could be that you have a problem with compaction. And if you have a problem where after you have bottom watered your plant, it takes forever to dry out and your soil is muddy, then it means that your soil need to be amended so that it can have a better airflow. Now there are some who use terracotta pots. So can you bottom water when you're using terracotta pots? Yes, you can. Just keep in mind that terracotta pots will wick water. So if you're going to be growing indoors in your terracotta pot or even outdoors, once you're using terracotta pots, then you need to use or add extra water to your plants because not only the soil but the pot itself will be absorbing the water. Now, here are some very common pests that can be found on indoor plants. Things like aphids, spider mites, white flies, thrips, fungus gnats. These type of pests, they like moisture and they love to be on indoor plants. So, and you know how devastating these guys can be when they take over your garden. So for that reason, you want to bottom water your plants as much as possible to try and keep these guys under control. Okay, so that's what I have to discuss with you today regarding bottom watering your plants. Do you guys bottom water your plants? Yeah, so, excuse me, been a bit of allergy. It's not allergy, but my sinus is draining. Yeah, so this is how you bottom water your plants. As we mentioned, some of the advantages of bottom watering and the disadvantage of bottom watering. So some plants actually love to be bottom watered, some plants don't necessarily like it. So it's recommended that you know the individual plants that you're growing, and based on the type of plant and what their preference is. Of course, if you have plants that you top water because they don't like to be bottom water, then you may have to find some other alternative to protecting them from pests if you are prone to pests. Fortunately, not all indoor plants will develop a pest issue, so that's pretty good. But if you find that you tend to be prone to having pests when you have an indoor garden, then you can always use a screen, pest screen or insect screen around your plants to help to control the pest, especially if you cannot bottom water. Let's see. And White says, I do for my seedlings. Okay. Princess Lillian says, I choose a couple that I bottom water. I have my sy- syngoniums in a pot on a separate source of water below them. Okay, okay. So have you ever find yourself underwatering your plants because you don't want to overwater them when you're doing bottom watering? I found myself in that situation quite a lot. I don't want to overwater, so I end up underwatering the plants. And especially because I don't really allow the water to soak all the way to the top of the plants. So because of that, sometimes you don't necessarily know how much moisture the plant has wicked. So one of the ways that you can test to know how much moisture is in your soil is you can either use a soil tester or you can just use your finger depending on the size of the pot. Because if it is seedlings and your seedlings are close together, then sticking your finger in the container is not recommended because you could damage your plant. But say, for example, you have a large pot with a pepper plant or some flowers in there, you can always stick your finger in it and feel, because then you will know if the first 2 inches or so is dry, then you can give it a little top up, or you can choose to let it stay for a little longer because you don't want to overwater, but at the same time, you don't want to underwater your plants as well. So if you are like me and you're afraid to overwater your plants, it is a good idea to check your plants every couple of days to ensure, look at them and see if they look as if they are thirsty. Because you know when plants lack liquid, they start to show signs very early. So constantly monitor them to make sure that they have sufficient moisture. Let's see. Princess says, yes, at times those bottom bowls run out of water. Yeah. So are you guys growing plants indoors at this time? Or are you overwintering plants? For now, I'm not really growing anything. I'm not planting anything indoors. I'm just overwintering a few plants, or at least attempting to. I've never really overwintered plants before, so this is going to be my first experience, which is quite interesting. I'm actually looking forward to see what will happen, if they're going to survive. Unfortunately, my onions that I was trying to overwinter because I want to get seeds from it, I went back there to look at them a few days ago and I noticed that they dried down because I didn't give them enough enough water. No, sorry, not that I didn't give them enough water. I gave them too much water. And you know how onion plants are, they're very sensitive to too much water, so the plants died. But so far, most of the plants seem to be doing well. Question: have you guys ever overwinter mint or lemon balm? I'm overwintering my mint, one of my mint and my lemon balm. But I noticed that while most of the plants seem to be doing okay, my lemongrass is doing very well. My green onion, not green onion, but my scallion is doing very well. But my lemon balm and my, what is it, my mint, my peppermint, for some reason they don't seem to be doing well. I don't know if maybe it's too cold for them on the window, or is it a watering issue? I don't know, but they don't seem to be doing well. The Some of the lemon balm definitely has dried down, so I got another set from the garage and brought it in. So we'll see what happened with it, because I'd really like to know if they are difficult to overwinter. Let's see. Princess says, I don't like to stick my finger in the soil. I pushed in a tissue. Oh, okay. And says, I'm growing and overwintering pepper, ginger, aloe vera, and sweet potato slips. Oh, nice. Speaking of ginger, I planted a ginger recently. Well, at the end of the growing season in a container outdoors, brought it in the garage, but I haven't seen it since. I need to go look for it now that you remind me about it. Okay, Princess, you have regular indoor plant. Yes, I think I always see you putting those plants in your videos, especially that lily thing there that I so like to see. Let's see. Okay, you've overwintered mint for the past 3 years and white. So have you had any issues with it? Because I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but first attempt at overwintering, at least it's my first attempt at growing peppermint. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but for some reason it and my lemon balm seem to be drying down. And they started drying down, especially the lemon balm, very quickly after I brought them indoors and the temperature started to change. So I don't know if it is temperature related or what it is, but for some reason it does not seem to be doing well. And surprisingly, the one that I have in the garage, none of my plants in the garage are exposed to light except for when I'm in the garage. But the lemon balm that is in the garage, they're spiny, but they are growing, they're doing okay. So I don't know why the one on my windowsill is not doing okay. Okay, you're overwintering your lemon balm and white. How is it doing? Do you have it in a container by itself, or do you have all your herbs in the one container? Princess says mint and lemon balm will survive winter and also come back beautifully early in the spring. Okay. Um, I'm gonna put that to the test. Maybe I should divide what I haven't. I don't know. I took up all my mints that I have outdoors and my lemon balm. But I think next year I'm going to put it to the test, or at least maybe I should put a container with them outdoors and see what happens if they will come back. But in my region where temperatures go down so low, I don't really know if it would come back because most things that come back in some regions will not come back here. But it would be interesting. Put it outside and see what happens. I can always restart the plant next year if they don't survive. Let's see. And White says I'm overwintering my lemongrass too. Okay, good. Yes, my lemongrass is doing well. It is growing so fast. In fact, it is growing faster than when it was outdoors in the summer. I can't figure it out, but it is growing a lot faster than how it was growing outdoors. Okay, it is by itself, and you don't have any issues with your lemongrass. Okay, you leave them outdoors. Okay, nice. Yeah, so I guess I can't compare mine with yours then because yours are outdoors and mine are indoors. Yes, that's what I'm thinking, that maybe it is too cold. It does feel cold when you go there, but I would think with the vent being below it and with the heat from the sun, whatever little heat the sun provides at this time of year, that maybe it would help a bit, but obviously that's not working. Let's see. Okay, the peace lilies are doing fine. Okay, good. You just cover with transparent bowl over them. Okay. It will die off, but the roots will stay safe. They don't like to be too warm in heated house. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think mine are too warm where they are because the windowsill is not very warm either. When you stand near it, you can feel the cold where you're standing. So it's not too warm. But yes, I think I'm going to put one of the mint out and see what happens if it comes back next year. I'm just gonna have to get myself a bowl, a clear bowl, as you say, to put over it. Oh, yes, maybe I should jot that down so I don't forget. Okay. Yes, definitely I'm going to be trying that. It'll be interesting to see what happens. One more experiment to do. Yay! Okay, so I am going to be leaving you guys in a little while. I gotta go get me something to eat before I head out to work. See, princesses, that's true. Warm is relative. I mean, indoor temperatures 22 to 25. Yes, and I keep my indoor temperature at 21, so it wouldn't be too warm or too cold for them because they grow outside where the temperatures can go up to the third over 30. So I guess 21 should be good enough for them. And I guess it wouldn't necessarily feel like 21 to them because they're on the window, so it might feel like a lower temperature than 21. So we'll see. I'm going to keep some inside and some outside and see what happens. Okay, so thank you guys for being here, for participating in the discussion, and for sharing your knowledge. Hopefully, I'll see you again on Friday, where we'll be discussing our worm farming topic. Let's see. Princess says, okay, see you again. Congrats on your 1,000. The sky is the limit. Okay, thank you, my dear. Thank you very much. The sky is definitely the limit. Okay, so have a lovely evening and stay safe. Same to you, and White. Have a wonderful week.